Why do I play Pathfinder 2nd Edition? What's that all about? And have I ever actually found any paths? This is the Dominomicon, authored and hosted by me, Dominic. The Dominomicon is dedicated to all nerdy things, with my current obsession being the TTRPG Pathfinder 2nd Edition. In this video chapter, I want to do something a little bit more personal and talk about why I actually play Pathfinder 2e. I have been GMing this system for around 8 years now, thus I have a ludicrous amount of experience with it, and I want to talk about the parts of PF2e that have kept me interested in it for all this time. And I want to make something clear from the beginning. This is entirely subjective. I'm not about to sit here and declare that PF2e is the objectively greatest tabletop RPG ever created and every other system should be cast into the sea. It'll take too long to gather them all up for a start. This is simply about why PF2e fits what I personally want from a tabletop game, narrowed down to 5 major things. If you enjoy this sort of content, please consider subscribing, liking the video, and sharing it with someone who might enjoy it. And if you can, please swipe on the comments and click that hype button. All of that stuff massively helps the channel. But for now, let's get personal and start the music. As I said, this is a rather personal list on why I love this system so much, why I run it at least 3 times a week, and why I create videos on it. While I have narrowed this down to 5 reasons, there's actually a crap load more about why I love PF2e. It is certainly not perfect. I actually have quite a lot of criticisms for this system, and the more I run it, the more I get. But also, the more I run it, the more I start to understand how well it has been designed. I've been creating content for the system for around 2 years now, and I hope you can spare your time, watch this video, and try to understand why I have dedicated a significant portion of my existence to this TTRPG. And while this video is basically going to be me gushing about the things I love about PF2e, maybe it'll rekindle your love for it as well, and maybe it'll teach you a couple of things, who knows. But thank you for watching, and thank you for sticking with this channel if you have been with me for some time, and if you're a new viewer, welcome. But let's get started. Let's begin with probably the most recognizable mechanic in Pathfinder 2e, the 3-action economy. And yes, I know every single Pathfinder player has heard of this approximately 87 quadrillion times. The part of the 3-action economy, though, that interests me the most is twofold. The first part is the fact that it's simple. It is genius, and yet it's so simple. It is very easy to understand what you can and cannot do every single turn when everyone has 3 actions. Every class, every build, every monster has 3 actions, and it keeps things so simple and understandable. And that leads to my second point. Because it's so universal and simple, it enables exploitation. I've said this many times in the past, but generally speaking, lots of monsters have 3 or 2 action combos, and spending your actions to remove their actions can disable their most powerful abilities. And once again, as I've said in the past, if you're fighting a boss creature, sometimes it's worth losing maybe an entire turn just to take away one of their actions, because mathematically your group is going to have more actions per turn than they are. For example, if you're building a tanky character that likes to trip enemies and you're facing a dragon, you could spend your entire turn moving up to it and tripping it. Yes, it may spend its first action standing up and then spend 2 actions using Draconic Frenzy to beat the living daylights out of you, but that means it's unable to get into position to do its breath weapon on the rest of your party. And that might not be the best example, but it is an example of something that you're able to do to just completely stop a creature doing its most devastating attack. And as I said, it's so simple, and yet it allows for a tactical mindset to prevail. And because everything is tied to that 3-action economy, it becomes very understandable what's going to happen each and every turn once you understand how you and the monsters work. And again, this allows you to start exploiting the system. Surely exploitation would be bad, right? Well, not in this system, because of point 2 and why I play PF2e. Balance is probably one of the biggest reasons I personally enjoy Pathfinder 2e, particularly from a GM perspective. Some people say that balance isn't important in a cooperative game, but I definitely think that is an incorrect statement. Balance matters because it means your personal choices actually mean something. If one player has optimized their character build and no one else even needs to be involved in anything in your campaign, then you're not going to be having a good time. That's why balance is important. It's not just important from a GM perspective, it makes character decisions more impactful. These are the sorts of things you start to understand as you really delve deep into Pathfinder 2nd Edition. It's not something you can really see on the surface. But I do want to place a disclaimer over the rest of this section. Pathfinder 2nd Edition is not perfectly balanced. So please discard your angry comment, though if you want to type an angry comment, tell me how handsome I am, you can do that. I don't mind, it's fine. So yeah, there's going to be stronger and weaker feats. There's some spells that, in my opinion, are probably too strong, and there's a bunch of spells that but are definitely too weak. Some classes are going to be slightly better than others, etc. And every now and then something gets released that makes me stare at it and think, Paizo, I love you, but what were you thinking? So when I say PF2E is balanced, I'm talking about the foundations of the system. If I'm building an encounter and the rules tell me that it's a moderate encounter, I can be reasonably confident about the rough amount of danger I'm putting in front of the party. If it says severe, I know I should probably pay attention, and if it says extreme, I know things may be about to become rather unpleasant. Those labels aren't perfect predictions because dice exist and players are unpredictable little creatures, plus RNG is a bitch. But the encounter building maths gives me a dependable starting point, and creature levels actually mean something. Even more crucially though, character optimization has guardrails around it. And I love character optimization. I love finding weird feat interactions and building characters that are particularly good at something, and I adore seeing my players come up with combos I hadn't ever considered. But there's a gigantic difference between optimization making somebody powerful and optimization completely destroying the underlying maths of the game. And PF2E, generally speaking, keeps that under control. And some of that is because of how bonuses work and how only different types stack. Some of it is just based around all the selections of things you can pick being generally well thought out so that the interactions don't completely destroy the entire system. And there's plenty more on that, but regardless, the fact of the matter is this system is a breeze to GM. It genuinely is so much fun GMing. I've heard GMs come from other systems who say that running PF2E feels more like you're a player than a GM versus other systems. And while I can't personally account for that, because sadly I do not have time to be a player as a forever GM, I can say that once you understand how the system works and how it interacts, it's so easy to run because you can trust the balance and the maths. Despite its complexity, I'd honestly say PF2E is a fantastic starting TTRPG to GM. The rarity system is also just phenomenal. Anything that isn't common is going to need your GM's express permission in order to choose it as a player. And that's great because some of the abilities aren't necessarily broken, but they might interrupt the setting itself or the plans you have as a GM. Teleport, for example, is more of a higher level spell, but still, you may have planned out some cool encounters for your party to find and defeat along a perilous journey, and a teleportation spell can kind of ruin all of that. Thus, the teleport spell is uncommon, meaning that when your player wants to pick it, they have to ask for your permission. And if you've already planned some stuff for them where teleport is going to ruin everything, you're allowed to say no. I mean, quite frankly, you're allowed to say no anyway, you're the GM, but you know, you might be the sort of GM that's going to recycle those encounters later on and allow them to have the spell, and that's fine as well. The point is here, it gives you the option as a GM. You don't have to worry about these things so much because of how the system is designed. And I'm eternally grateful to Paizo for making this an absolute joy to run as a GM. Speaking of things I love as a GM, let's get to the third point. Critical success, success, failure, critical failure. You all know how this works. If you beat a DC by 10 or above, it's a critical success, and if you fail it by 10 or below, it's a critical fail. It's not just nat 20s and nat 1s anymore. And this was actually one of the things that sold this system to me as a GM, because it is amazing as a player to roll a natural 20 and get to declare it to your fellow players and GM. Cue the celebration, the fireworks, the doves flying high into the sky, and the distant sound of babies' laughter as light and peace is restored to the world for that one fleeting moment. But for me as a GM that doesn't like to murder my players and in fact likes to work with them for collaborative storytelling, what's better than a player rolling a natural 20 to me is getting to tell my player that they crit because they rolled high. Not a nat 20, just high enough to crit. I love this, possibly more than anything else in the system, and especially during difficult encounters. And as every +1 matters, that matters a great deal. I love that players are once again able to use tactics to give themselves an advantage. And again, it's simple, it's easy to understand, it makes perfect sense, and it means that every little bonus that you can give potentially counts towards something ultimately becoming a crit. And that changes the entire system of the way you think about it, probably in ways you don't even realize, like skills, for example, getting to interact with the maths within an encounter. It's an amazing thing all on its own. But like the 3-action economy, it encourages a particular mindset and even allows players that generally don't care about maths to be able to get a little more involved. Simple abilities like Courageous Anthem and Guidance do allow for simple but easy ways to increase your numbers to potentially make those 4 degrees of success your little bitch. And this once again simplistic system infects basically the entire game in a good way. Now that sounded like a disease, but like a positive one. Can you have a positive disease? And like, if not, why don't they exist? Because they definitely should, both in Pathfinder and in real life. And from a GM's perspective, when you're trying to challenge your players and they roll like a 5 on a saving throw, and that happens to be a critical fail, it's an amazing way to suddenly make the players terrified. They realize that if a 5 is still a crit fail, this encounter may be beyond them, or maybe they need to be really careful. And most players listening may not realize how satisfying it is as a GM to have the ability to make your players suddenly lock in. They go from laughing and joking to coordinating and planning out entire turns, and that is such an amazing feeling as a GM because you want your players to be challenged. You want them sometimes to be frightened. You want to engage with those emotions. That's what TTRPGs are all about. It's not just about killing enemies and solving puzzles and getting cool loot. It's about role play, and you cannot role play without feelings. This and the 3-action economy are probably the most incredible things in the entire system from a player's perspective. But I'm going to move on to point number 4 before I rant endlessly about this particular topic, because I honestly feel like I could. There's just so much Pathfinder 2e. We have nearly 30 classes at this point, each with potentially dozens and maybe even hundreds of feats. We have thousands of spells, items, monsters. This is just a behemoth of a system. There's already enough content now to basically last you a lifetime of playing. I have spent years GMing this system, making videos, reading all the books. It's ridiculous how much time I have spent in this system, and I still have an enormous list of things I haven't properly touched on yet. There's classes I have yet to dive into, archetypes I've barely touched, spells I've never properly considered, bizarre items buried in books that I've probably completely missed, character concepts I want to mess with, subsystems I want to explore, massive chunks of Galarian I know almost nothing about, and I absolutely love it because it feels like an endless well of content to me. And this is basically the same if you're a player. Most players that I GM for when making new characters want to wait until everyone else is finished before they even look at the list because there's so many things that they could pick that they don't even know where to start. You could call that a bad thing if you wanted, but having too much content can certainly be intimidating for new players in particular, but for people who love this system, more content is basically never going to be a bad thing, so long as it stays balanced and consistent, which generally speaking, it does. And finding those niche synergies when a spell or feat interacts perfectly with a particular other feat or spell or class ability, etc. is so satisfying for players. Yes, white room scenarios barely work in this system, and quite honestly, you're better off planning for common occurrences rather than when the stars align occurrences. But you can sort of plan for both, and when the stars finally do align and you can do your mega ultra death kill moment, it's ridiculous, stupid, and incredible. And you can build entire character concepts around these abilities, and the game will still be balanced at the end of all this. Your GM may have to put you on their shit list, but they're not going to outright murder your PC while they sleep. And once again, that's because of the balance. The balance brings all of this together. And despite there being so much content, the trait system that I mentioned earlier really bounds everything. It keeps it balanced and keeps it fair because your GM can say no to some of these crazy interactions if need be. You can criticize parts of PF2E as much as you like, such as us not having enough general feats or some of the ancestry feats for particular ancestries are kinda underwhelming, but overall you cannot deny that there is a ridiculous amount of content. And generally speaking, I see that as a big positive. You're never going to see the same character build twice. It's just basically never going to happen. And this system feeling fresh to me and still interesting with lots of depth after 8 years is kind of staggering when you think about it. So sit and think about it. I'll give you like 3 seconds to sit and think about it. So did you actually think about it for 3 seconds, or did you get overwhelmed because I told you to do it very quickly and then your brain couldn't think, or you were thinking a joke was coming or something? You know what, I'm just going to move on. You can think about it after this video, right? I mean, that makes more sense. As long as you promise me that you'll do it, then I can move on to my last point. I have a tiny anecdote, and that's not a euphemism, by the way. I mean, I have a small real story to tell you. That's also not a euphemism. Last year, I was looking at other TTRPGs, and I'm not going to name the particular one I was looking at, but I found one that sounded really interesting to me that would suit me probably just as much as PF2E does. But the more I looked at it, the more I realized that I'd have to have lots of different books, and building characters would actually require having PDFs or physical books in front of me. And the thought of needing all these books in front of me whenever I was running a game just made me have a much greater love for PF2E than I ever had before. And that's because the digital ecosystem for PF2E makes playing and running it as smooth as butter, smoother even. Being able to search the web for an ability or a creature stat block or an obscure magical item and it come up immediately and you can click it and it explains everything to you without an account, without registering, without paying anything. It honestly just feels like it's cheating. It's so easy. This also means that players generally don't have to do a crap ton of homework to understand all of their classes, abilities, and spells. Yes, generally they should definitely be doing that. But in other systems where certain abilities and spells are only in certain supplements that you need to have with you at every given moment in case one of those abilities comes up and the GM says, wait, how does that work? The PF2E digital way is just so much cleaner and easier. And this is one of those things, honestly, that we do not appreciate enough. The Archives of Nethys is basically the central database for pretty much everything Pathfinder 2e. And I'm even going to say here that these guys do this whole thing for free. So honestly, if you do have a little bit of spare cash, please consider throwing some their way through the Patreon, because they so absolutely deserve it. I'll even link to it as the first link in the description. No, this isn't an advert. This is just me trying to give them some support. Hosting costs money after all. Never mind the other websites such as Path Builder, Wanderer's Guide, or even Foundry VTT. Like, it's so good to be able to look up everything practically instantly. And Foundry saves me so much trouble. The automated maths makes running PF2E so much fun, even if the forced updates break my modules and cost me hours each time. Also, module makers, I love all of you, except the ones that force me to join your Discord. Nobody wants to join your Discord, stop doing that. So I definitely want to make a big shout out to all of the digital creators for Pathfinder 2e. Whether you're the team behind the Pathfinder 2e system in Foundry, or you're part of the Archives of Nethys or Path Builder or anything else out there, I genuinely want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for making this system so much easier to run than it would be otherwise. And I also need to thank Paizo for giving all of these websites and players/GMs access to this stuff for free. Most of the TTRPGs do not do that, and Paizo don't need to do this. They choose to do this. Criticize them all you want, but it's amazing that they do this. It's one of the best things about introducing new players to this system. You could just say to them, you can look up anything online for free. It is incredible. So those are the 5 biggest reasons why I personally keep playing Pathfinder 2e. The 3-action economy constantly asks me what my actions are actually worth. The game's balance isn't perfect, but its foundations are dependable enough that I can generally trust them. The 4 degrees of success make practically every roll more interesting and make small bonuses and penalties genuinely meaningful. There's an absurd amount of content to explore within PF2E, and the digital ecosystem removes an enormous amount of friction from what is otherwise a very large and mechanically detailed game. But I don't think any one of those reasons is why I play Pathfinder 2e. Though the content one is probably my favorite, because having an endless supply of Pathfinder subjects to make videos about is helpful to me for some reason. It's convenient, really. None of this means that PF2E is for everyone, but it is definitely 100% for me, and these reasons and lots more are why I choose to play Pathfinder 2e. Thank you very much for indulging this video chapter. I'd really like to know why you play Pathfinder 2e, because I imagine everyone's got a slightly different answer, so please pop yours in the comments. I genuinely do want to hear what your favorite reason is. And if you found the video chapter helpful and or enjoyable, please consider liking it, hyping it, subscribing, and sharing with someone else who spends probably an unhealthy amount of time thinking about tabletop games. I'm eternally grateful to my lovely community, and if you want to see your name at the end of my videos, please consider looking at my Patreon or becoming a member. It really helps keep this channel alive. As ever, I'd like to give a shout out to my artist Leandro Notado. Check the description for a link to his portfolio. And as for those names, a big thank you to Max Magnus 20019, Ozzy Smith, Nikola Milenkovic, Kyle Travis, Bentfair, Apteryx13, and patrons and archivists Clash Q and Patrick O'Donoghue. But for now, this is Dominic of the Bominomicon, wishing you a fond farewell, and until next time, goodbye.